Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Nicole Matthews, 114th President of the National Press Club and Assignment Manager for U.S. Video at the Associated Press. Today's program was organized by the club's International Correspondents Committee. We are so happy to have with us Capricia Marshall, the former head of protocol for the Obama administration, and someone many of you may know from her time in the Clinton White House as well. Capricia is the author of Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy and How to Make It Work for You, which is a kind of memoir of her time in government service and is a very enjoyable read, if I do say so myself, and nicely done. I promise you will learn a lot about the diplomatic operations of the Obama White House and really begin to understand in a new way the role of protocol in diplomacy. Capricia really had the job of translating the culture of other countries to our leaders in a way that would make them more effective in presentations and in social settings. It is a fascinating and critical job that I would say is underappreciated by the general public. So let's hear more about what it's like to be advising the president, the first family, cabinet members, and others on matters of protocol. Capricia, welcome to the National Press Club.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Lisa. It's a pleasure to join you, and congratulations on your appointment. They're very, very lucky to have you in that helm of leadership.
Thank you so much, Capricia. We are grateful to have you on, and sorry that we couldn't be in person, but virtual works for now. And we'll definitely work on getting you over at the club for something in person. So to begin with, for many of our listeners and viewers, give us what is protocol and why is it necessary?
Well, thank you for asking that question. My book, and I appreciate the note of my recently published book, is based upon what is protocol, and why is it a powerful tool? Why was it a powerful tool for me in government, and how it can be incredibly useful to people in business and in their personal lives? Well, protocol, it's the rules that govern professional government and social interactions. In the Office of Protocol, what we did was we created a foundation for diplomacy to take place. We were the ones who selected the room and what went inside of that room before any leader walked through that door, from lighting to the table, every element we put into place. And we did that with a great attention to every element, because they affect the interaction, colors, lighting. All of these micro details can have a major impact on the engagement. We created the roadmap for the bilateral or multilateral discussion for a couple of reasons. First, we actually wanted to make sure that they didn't fall into any potholes along the way, made any errors, unforced errors. We wanted them to know exactly where the expectations lied on both sides of the table, and making sure that also they were on the same page. It is really imperative in diplomacy, as with your business dealings, that both sides know exactly where the discussion, the interaction, the deal is heading. Because if errors occur, it can embarrass one side or the other. And what we're trying to achieve is a respectful understanding of each other in our interactions with the use of protocol. Worse yet, it can actually perhaps even lead to a miscommunication, can lead to something that might be perceived as intentional, and that can sour the deal immediately. And then we experience that in protocol again and again, when the unexpected was suddenly revealed, even after you've gone through hours and hours of discussion, from step to step, minute by minute, second by second, of how that engagement between these two leaders was to take place. When you ignore a cultural norm or mangle a title, the infraction goes really deeper than the surface. It affects the emotions of the participants and the tenor of the exchange. And, frankly, emotions are already running really super high when you're managing deals at this level. So when something doesn't quite go according to that plan, as I said, it really can cause a mistrust. So protocol sets those expectations, creates that foundation, and also maps out where this interaction is going to go. So people feel comfortable in that, they feel mutually respected in that, and you're moving towards the goals set forth in what was planned between the two sides.
So interesting and so intricate. No one would think that all of that goes into a simple meeting between two leaders. A few of us watching today may not know the difference between rituals and ceremonies too. Can you talk about what the difference is between the two and why it's important that leaders on both sides understand both?
Absolutely. And, Lisa, it is interesting when we have sort of a different tempo, if you will, between different leaders, our own leaders here in the United States and those that we interact with globally. Some like to get down to business and to, get to work right away, whereas others are, a little more, we need to set the tone here, and we need to be respectful of rituals and those ceremonies. A ritual is very consistent. There's an expectation there, as to how business will be conducted. Whereas a ceremony will really sort of highlight, a state visit. There are rituals that are part of that, and there are ceremonial aspects of it. When I entered into my position, I, as I say in my book, I believe that President Obama grew to adore me. He was not an enormous fan of Hail to the Chief and some of the other aspects that were part of being a president. These rituals and ceremonies, he just wanted to get in there and sort of just do what he was expected to do. And I explained to him, this is how we honor our visitor who's coming to us, whether it is a military cordon on the South Lawn, or if it is certain music that will be played, flags raised, holding these moments of silence, laying a wreath at a tomb. Very important in the whole aspect of diplomacy and their interactions globally. Apologies. And so that he began to understand that over time, and really did begin to appreciate the effect that it had on his counterparts when they arrived to the United States. So it took a little bit of time, but I got it.
Sounds like he was a normal guy who just ended up at the White House and just wanted to do the work.
You bet.
Yeah, that's very interesting. How do you think that President Biden did at the recent G20 meetings?
Oh, I think he hit it out of the park. I really had the wonderful pleasure of working with President Biden when he was vice president. He, during all of our engagements, our international engagements, I conducted them in the West Wing, usually in the Roosevelt Room with him. And what I love most about working with President Biden, then vice president, was his desire to make that connection with his counterpart. He would burst into a room with all of this wonderful energy and just, right in there with the shaking of the hand and that phenomenal 50-watt Joe Biden smile and how are you doing? And he also really relished briefings. He wanted to know every detail about that person, about the country, about the delegation before walking in, because he wanted to make it personal. He wanted to create that personal connection with an individual, not so that it was all business. You know, how am I going to get to know you? How are we going to move this needle? Well,
Right.
it was, he knew exactly how to do that. And by making that, by threading that personal connect between the two. And he did it brilliantly in throughout the entire European tour, from the EU to NATO, G20, and then of course the bilateral, the big kahuna one with President Putin. It was just extraordinary to watch him navigate, to bring back together the importance of the multilateral, to convey to the world that the United States has not ceded its position at the table, and to work each leader individually with that personal connection that he does so very well, to again establish those very strong bilateral ties with our friends around the world.
So
He was
you just gave a really glowing review of President Joe Biden, and I want to talk about the fact that protocol is not politics, right? It's not political.
Oh, no.
So talk about, and you know, the last administration notwithstanding, and if you want to, you can go there, but talk about how the differences between individuals and how this isn't about politics, it's more about personality, the other P.
Oh, and you know, Lisa, I'm so glad that you're raising this, because frankly, to me, I loved my position because it wasn't political. I've held more political positions in the past. During the, as you noted, during the Clinton administration, I was social secretary. The function of that position is to highlight, to communicate visually through events, the president's domestic agenda primarily. And protocol is really about establishing and continuing the work from previous administrations. You have to know what has come before you. What did the Secretary of State, the president in the administration before you, Republican or Democrat, does not matter. What did they establish? And what are we moving the thread line through? And regrettably, I have to say that I don't believe that the last administration understood that as well. It was supposed to be a sort of cease and desist, and then I'm going to start anew. Well, that's just not how diplomacy works. You can navigate the troubled waters and certainly take a different path, but you have to continue. It's part of that sort of seamless, continuous thread that you need to move through your diplomatic engagements. And I love that in my position because I consulted with all of my predecessors, Republican, Democrat. How did you successfully build relationships? What part of the job, the position, did you find you could create a stronger tie with the diplomatic corps, because those are the best of the best that are sent to our country. They are amazing individuals, representatives from their various countries, and the United States receives the best. So I went to Lucky Roosevelt, who had worked for President Reagan. I went to Nancy, oh my goodness, who worked for President Bush, and she had started wonderful programs, amazing, at Nancy Brinker, Ambassador Brinker, who started wonderful programs. And each of them would give me, their information. How could I continue to do the work that occurred before I arrived?
That's super. Was this always like an ambassador position? Did it always have the title ambassador? Because I got to tell you, I was really surprised by the title. there?
Oh, well, no, it actually didn't. It was, Mr. Forever, because there were no Mrs. Up
Gotcha.
until Shirley Temple Black actually was the first female chief of protocol.
Okay.
And so she sent, that woman was pretty spectacular. She sent a lot of firsts. And there are very few of us, very few women actually hold the position of chief of protocol globally. Why? Because you are the person that is glued to your leader's side, and most global leaders are men. So they'd prefer to have a male aide, a male chief next to them. Well, I was lucky that President Obama didn't have a problem with that, actually encouraged it. When the rank of ambassador was given, because we stand in the stead of the president. When I loved the opportunity, the responsibility to show up at Andrews Air Force Base when a visitor, whether it was a king or queen, president or prime minister, would arrive, and on the tarmac, rain, snow, very, very hot weather, whatever it might be, stood there at the base of the staircase. And as they descended the steps, I would extend my hand and say, on behalf of President Obama, welcome to the United States.
Yeah, that's
It just
powerful.
gave me a chill. It was wonderful. But I received that opportunity because I held the rank of ambassador. Someone has to be at a high level to be receiving on behalf of the President of the United States. And so it was finally recognized that we had to go through Senate confirmation, which is not fun, but to receive that rank.
Okay, so much about this. Let's get a little bit into the nuts and bolts of it all, if we can describe it that way. You write in the book about soft power, hard power, smart power. Share with us the differences between each one of those, and especially where smart power can be used effectively, which might seem like a dumb question, but just wondering.
Oh, no, not a dumb question at all. Actually, it's an incredibly effective power. We all pretty much know what hard power is: war, economic sanctions. It's the tough stuff. It's what we pull out when we really need to make that point. It's how we engage diplomatically when we have to push hard on the other side. That is the sort of the last effort. Before that was termed by actually Joe Nye soft power, to indicate how can I pull you into my way of thinking. I'm coming to the table here with a certain set of goals, and I want to achieve those goals. Now, you are coming to the table probably with something that's either dramatically or slightly different than mine, and you want to achieve those goals for your side. And again, this is in government, business, even in your personal relationships, we know. But how can I effectively use tools to pull you into my way of thinking, of attracting you into the goals that I have set forth? So we collaborate somewhere where I've got a little bit of the advantage. Smart power utilizes both a little bit of hard and a little bit of soft. So one of the best examples I can tell you of that, as I watched it, I personally watched it happen when then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was traveling to China, and I was traveling with her on this occasion, and was told while in air that a Chinese dissident had jumped the fence of our U.S. embassy and was seeking asylum. And so now what are we going to do? Now she's traveling over to have meetings with President Hu and the delegation about people-to-people exchanges. How do we get to know each other better so that our people understand one another better? And that's phenomenal soft power. Well, now we have a huge issue, a huge global issue. And how are we going to manage both of those? And I have to say, it was like watching an amazing an amazing film taking place as I saw her navigate this at a bilateral meeting with President Hu. They discussed beforehand with her direct counterpart the negotiations and where the United States was demanding that they go. And if you did not do that, we were going to have to do A, B, and C. And then in front of the cameras with President Hu, discussing the importance of our people-to-people exchanges and how we're going to do this. So there was just this dichotomy going back and forth, and amazing diplomats on our side, like Kurt Campbell and then even Jake Sullivan, and negotiating back and forth while we were also really stressing the importance of these exchanges, cultural exchanges, student exchanges, et cetera. And it worked. In the end, there was an understanding on their side and ours. We had the deal of how this person was going to make their way and their family to the United States, and also, which we all know is very important, save face in the Chinese government so that our relationship can continue to move forward collaboratively.
I'm so glad that you shared that very specific example, because I think that as a journalist, and I'm betting that you're also having to weigh in how potentially the press could mess up everything that you set up. Because we want to know, as journalists, we want to see that engagement on camera, and knowing that that's going on behind the scenes is what frustrates us, because we want to see it. Can you talk about how you take the media into consideration when you're setting up for your protocol and your diplomatic discussions?
Oh, 100%. The importance of it is one of our top priorities. It is, in the United States, as we hold dearly our freedoms of speech and expression, freedom of the press. And it is quite interesting when we are dealing with our global counterparts who sometimes want us to make a protest go away out in front of their hotel because it's not making their leader look very good, or how we can manipulate certain situations so that it's reflected better in the press. And we're like, well, we're all about transparency. And so we have to, we protect our rights here. And in addition to that, we sort of show it is as how it is. And so there is this sometimes struggle. There were times in some countries where our press bus was accidentally sent down a dark road, and I would have to go and turn to the president and say, we can't find our press corps right now. And he said, well, then I'm not leaving this room until we do. And so you have to hold firm. Certain doors sometimes were closed, and we would have to almost physically body block to allow the press in, to allow our photographer, the pool in. That's also an interesting concept, almost, a little bit more American. So we really were, in protocol, we're the bridges. We're the bridges between the US government and the foreign government. So we go back and we have to explain to our foreign counterparts why it is so important, why this is important, and why we're not going to budge on it. This is a deal. This is part of the deal, and it's an element that we're not going to change. And we would have to then communicate back to the US, well, they don't particularly like that deal, and they want to change that deal. And so, really being that intermediary that assists in those negotiations back and forth. But the press was always, we felt very protective. That and interpreters. We were very protective of interpreters as well.
Well, we're getting some questions in from our viewers, and I just want to, since you mentioned how we deal with our foreign counterparts, one of the key diplomatic efforts of the Obama administration was the Iran nuclear agreement, which was super complicated in part because we don't have, normal diplomatic, relations there. Can you talk about the role that protocol plays in such a situation, and also I guess I also want to, I'm curious about, our club member, Jason Rezaian, at a time when he was being held. I'm wondering
Mm.
how protocol was involved in that and getting and securing his release at that time,
Mm.
if you can recall that.
Yeah, yeah. So this is for me, these are moments that are just incredibly so memorable, and you feel is your position is so validated and worthy, if you will,
Mhm.
because you are a part of the footsteps of history. You know, here we are. How can we create a structure, a framework that will work in this particular situation? And so we don't receive, I had top secret clearance, which was great, so that we could get some of the details of what we were stepping into, and assist then in creating that proper environment. I would sit down with the NSC in the West Wing and have a full-on discussion about what we proposed, what we thought, and then receiving feedback immediately so that we could assist in, and again, like creating that proper environment. Then we went away. We are not seen. We are not a part of the engagement. We go in, we set, and then we remove ourselves from the, and become invisible, if you will. Oftentimes I felt like I was a little bit like Harry Potter with my invisibility cloak, in the corner, because I just wanted to make sure that things were going right, but you certainly don't want to be an element of any of the discussions or the engagements. And then I would, swoosh out of the room after I could tell that the pace was happening, the conversations, things were okay. People felt, not the conversation necessarily, but more that just the mood, the environment felt right, that I didn't miss something there, whether it was lighting or the table size or just any one of those elements. And
I'm just curious, was there anything specific about that specific instance that you can recall that maybe weighed on you, or that changed the balance of your direction for that conversation, for that negotiation?
No. There was I departed, if you recall, in 2013.
Okay.
Those moments, those exchanges came a little bit later. And so I was watching with a heavy heart because I'd love to have been there, but I wasn't.
Okay. If you were preparing President Biden to travel to Europe, uh, where he would be bound to get questions about the January 6th insurrection, how do you explain something like that in a social setting? Or do you try to focus on other areas like, elephant in the room kind of situation?
I believe that there are ways in which I have a very challenging family who have very different perspective on politics and matters of the world that are very different from mine, and so I get a lot of practice at presenting my personal opinion, but based upon, as much as you possibly can, on historic reference. If you can look back to ways in which something occurred in history that went really well because of our belief in our democratic system, our belief in the foundation of our country. Why did these moments succeed even when they were challenged? And so I've been talking about January 6th quite a bit, not only with my friends and colleagues who have the same perspective of me. I feel like it's very important to have those discussions with people who have an opposite opinion and who perhaps believe something very, very different. Because I learned something I learn a lot. I learn a great deal from listening to their perspective. And that's a really big part of diplomacy and protocol is communication. How are you communicating? What words are you choosing? What tone are you using?
Mm.
Are you listening? Are you hearing the words that they are using, so that your reaction isn't just a guttural one and comes, right back at them, but that you have, having done your research, using your research, your historic perspective, and then your presentation sometimes can move minds. It can change opinions. And again, that's what soft power is about. Communication is a soft power tool. President Biden has this, oh my gosh, an abundance. His empathetic soul, his manner to understand, to put himself into the shoes of the person he is talking to is an extraordinary characteristic. It's amazing talent that he uses. Then he's building that bridge of understanding. He's bringing that person closer to the middle. He's collaborating with them, as opposed to just continuing the bashing on the one side. You're never going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anywhere in that discussion if you feel as though you just got to keep hammering that same nail. And he doesn't do that. He brings them along. He creates that bridge.
So let's go back to your book. In your book, you talk about cultural IQ, which is just a fascinating term to me. And your question: who in the world are we, and who in the world are they, and the importance of cultural IQ. I'm wondering, do Americans lack cultural IQ? Are we running a deficit? Do we need more cultural IQ?
Oh, well, I would say that this is pretty much a global issue. I'm so saddened to have seen the outcome from the soccer match between England and Italy. And I think yes, of course, there's absolutely a race-based problem, to say the least. But there's also there's a enormous cultural element that is missing. I think that if we take cultural IQ is all about really understanding that person who is not quite like you. And so they didn't come from the same background, socioeconomic, religious, race, sex. It's all very, very different. So how do I hone in on who they are, what they are about? How can I learn from them? How can I, create a relationship with them if I don't know those questions, if I'm not willing to make that connection? And I think that was part of the problem, that, the blame game, the must be that reason is due to a just lack of cultural IQ. And if we can, raise that amongst us, make it a priority of individuals, you just do better as a human being, generally speaking. So I was really saddened by that. And that's one sort of recent, I think, example of.
You can probably also apply that to the attacks on Asian Americans in this country.
100%
on coronavirus.
Absolutely, 100% on that. Again, different cultures are operate with a different pace, different traditions, expectations. And so when we landed in a country, I was very excited about that. I wanted to learn about them. I wanted to get to know them. I wanted to smell those scents of this country, to feel those differences and meet the extraordinary people. Well, we had to come with that open mindset. You have to arrive. And I regrettably, some diplomats just don't do that. They operate with an American mindset. And what's my way is my way, and this is the way that it should be. And and you need to make that connection with me. Those usually fail. Those are failed relationship building opportunities. And I also wanted them to learn about me and my beautiful, wonderful country and the people of my country. And so sharing those opportunities with them. When you close that down, you really do cut off that opportunity. What we have here in the United States is this magnificent quilt of difference. I mean, we have every person, background, tradition, culture from around the world in every town, village, city in the United States. And so there's this it sort of boggles the mind of how we're all American, and yet we find and spotlight these differences and hatred towards a specific type of American. Mm-hmm. I am hopeful that the press, and they've done a wonderful job of this, I think, throughout the last year and a half in particular, of highlighting where we've gone wrong. And here's now how we can correct, how maybe we can learn to love and embrace one another, learn more about one another in a healthy way, so that this hatred, misunderstanding, I'm consistently just befuddled by this, misunderstanding, the fear, frankly, of women who wear a head covering. Why does that bother you so much? Why do you find that to be so horrific that you have to snatch it off someone's head? Understand why she's covering her head, that this is a religious purpose. For her, it's protective, it's symbolic. And, or if someone is wearing a turban, I mean, there are all of these wonderful differences that we can experience here in our great nation. And if we only took the time to understand them instead of being afraid of them, because I really do believe it's based in fear, and then we react with an angry outward expression. But if we understood them, we certainly would become more collaborative. You're missing out on, again, an opportunity to get to know probably a pretty fantastic person.
I'm wondering, going back to politics a little bit, Vice President Harris's communications department has kind of been in the news a little bit for some not so, glorious things. But I'm wondering, what advice would you give to your colleagues who prepare for protocol in support of Vice President Harris? Would there be any special needs there that should be considered? Especially, she's the first woman vice president, so there are different things to be taken into account. But then you also have issues that seem to be clouding the air there for her.
Yes. Being the first in any position of that great importance is difficult. She has taken a major step on behalf of all of us. And I am immensely, immensely proud. I admire her a great deal for coming forth and taking that on, because, she could have said no to then candidate Joe Biden, but she embraced it. And I think that it has presented a few challenges that she didn't even foresee. I regret to state that I think in our country, we still have issues with women in leadership positions, having attempted to make a woman the first president of the United States a couple of times, and watching what they go through on the campaign trail is really surprising, really a little bit of a heartbreak as well. Seeing how many women still are lacking in our legislative body. We're getting there on the Supreme Court, not quite there, and also in the C-suite offices. So it's tough. It is a tough mantle. Now, there are, and I talk as well about this considerably in my book about how do you face that? And how do you face these challenges as a woman? And what are some of the tools that you can use to help you navigate these tricky waters? And I present to them, adopting an equalizing mindset is first and foremost really, really important. We are.
Can you say that again? Adopting
an equalizing mindset. We as women, we come with empathy and abundance. We're nurturers, naturally, oftentimes nurturers. But we have to sharpen that. We have a value, and we have to sharpen that don't back down attitude. Despite all of the progress that women are making, some high achieving women are seen as selfish and they're less likable by both men and women. We have to be careful there. But we've seen that while, progress may be glacial, it is really made by those who stay in the game. For other women, we have to offer the hand and not the heel. We have to help. We have to learn from our male counterparts how we help each other up the ladder, offering internship opportunities, mentorship opportunities, whatever we can. Create those support systems. Create the support systems within the offices. I mean, at the White House, I was very, very lucky to have worked within an office that was headed by Hillary Clinton when she was First Lady, and then a primarily all female, except for one or two guys every now and again, that it was a great support system, particularly when I had my son, and made sure that it was collaborative, that we were helping each other move up in various positions when positions became open. We are expected to know more, so do your homework, be prepared, raise as you travel internationally. And, I've been sending a little bit of this signaling over to the Vice President's office to raise their global cultural gender IQ. What we expect here in the United States may be very different, but don't defer your power, certainly, but just understand the culture of the country, the government that you are working with. And, there was a wonderful lessons that Christine Lagarde, who I have immense regard for, she's president of the ECB, and she has just done amazing work around the world as the former head of the IMF, and then before that in the French government. But she said, listen, I understand tokenism. I understand when I'm the one who is asked to sit on the stage because I'm a woman and they needed to have, oh my gosh, we've got 4 guys and we don't have the one woman. We got to get one woman. So she's like, so I said, fine, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to kill it. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to make them want me back. And she did. And then she opened the door further and she brought other women through that door and kept inviting and saying, there's another gal that I know who would be great at this subject matter or that subject matter. She just kept pushing that door open wider and wider. So yes, we should avoid those mantles. We should make sure that there are qualified, extraordinary women, which there are in abundance. We don't need binders for that. But, helping each other through that and then networking better. I'm trying to help the women on the vice president's staff. Many of them are young. How do I help them with their personal network so that they meet more people in Washington? They meet their predecessors. I've been here a long time now. I know a lot of people and I have a pretty solid network. So I want to make sure that they feel supported. You need support systems. You're going to make mistakes. How do I get up from those mistakes? How can I correct? Who can I go to get consultation with? And there's just these phenomenal networks of women here who are there at the ready with the safety nets and will help you get back on your feet again.
You write in your book too about beyond the practical purpose of etiquette and lies a hidden world of communication and leverage. It says, like an emoji, etiquette is a code that transmits intention and feeling. I'm wondering, well, first of all, a goofball question just came to my mind. Is it ever okay to use an emoji in etiquette in our new world? But Talk about the impact or the influence of social media on protocol.
Yes, I sort of steer slightly clear of social media, although I shouldn't. I should be engaging more because it is a part of our society. It is the way in which we communicate, and it will only continue. It will never cease and desist, no matter how many lawsuits are brought against Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. But it is the way in which we are communicating. And so, how do you embrace that? And how do you embrace that appropriately? Protocol basis of it is, to show respect to your counterpart. How can I make a point respectfully within the character limits or with that special photo? I actually had, while I was chief of protocol, I had these sessions that were designed to assist ambassadors in the diplomatic corps on perfecting their skill sets, their tool sets while they were in the United States. We're tough here. How can I be a more effective ambassador, in particularly if I wasn't part of like the Foreign Service or a part of a previous posting? And so I had ambassadors come in and talk to them about how to effectively tweet, how to effectively use Instagram so that it is furthering the goals of your president or prime minister, your administration, and while being culturally sensitive also to those here in the United States. So the last thing you want to do is cause offense. How can I go about doing that so that I'm using it effectively and then avoiding those pitfalls? And Ambassador Sarukan, who's still here in the United States, was the ambassador of Mexico. I had him come in and do a whole lesson, and people were just so thrilled by it because it is foreign, if you will, and difficult to really navigate well. But there were ways in which to do that. But you need people to help you learn how to do that effectively.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I think emojis are okay, Lisa.
Emojis are okay? Fantastic, because I use them all the time. I feel like I'm always breaking etiquette rules, nonetheless. And I keep referring back to our previous administration because, you can't just kind of like turn a ship on a dime. And in the current environment, following an administration like the one that we had, how big of a challenge is it to restore trust through diplomacy and explain the role? I mean, we've been talking about protocol, but really, if you could focus your response based on what the Biden administration is most likely going through. And before we started talking here publicly with listeners, you talked about how the State Department is going through such a struggle. And I recall even when we were reporting when Secretary, his name just escaped me, Pompeo did not meet with some of the folks when he would travel abroad, which was not a protocol thing. So talk about the toughness that is involved now in kind of resetting the diplomatic environment.
So the world really has never seen or experienced what the United States went through in the change of administration and the style in which we engaged with our global partners, whether it's the UK and it's our fine firm friend, or with those in more difficult countries in which our relationship was not on very solid ground. They just hadn't seen this style from the United States, frankly, ever. And so it created an insecurity. Where is the United States? Where are they landing? How am I supposed to know how to negotiate, to work with them if I'm unsure of where we now stand? Pulling out of NATO, pulling out of Paris, there were so many moves that the United States made so abruptly that it just, again, created this overall lack of insecurity, an unsure atmosphere. And you're trying to collaborate. I mean, frankly, we are hopeful to have world peace, right? We want to peaceably live amongst one another. We want not only what we have in the United States to flourish, but we certainly want the world to be at peace and to flourish. And it has always been a tenet of our democracy to help other countries when they are in trouble. And we believe strongly in our democracy, but our democracy was tested time and again. The foundation, the principles that were set forth by our forefathers, and the world saw that. And they wonder, does democracy work? Or is this that failed experiment? Perhaps I should be going with a country that has a more solid, firm style of government than the United States. So it's bigger than what we are experiencing now within our country, and certainly within our government, is bigger than changed policies. It is an overall sentiment of, can I trust the United States? Can I believe in their ideals of democracy when they come to us and they say it works, that allowing your people freedoms of the press, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, that all of these liberties do work, as opposed to what we're seeing now, a wave of authoritarian governments throughout the world, and in particularly to the closest region to us in Latin America. I'm quite fearful of what is happening in Latin America right now, especially what occurred just a few days ago in Haiti. It's this sentiment, is this change, and in large part, we were missing from the discussions. We were missing from holding up and supporting our allies around the world and assisting those that were in trouble for a few years. So reestablishing those connections is so important. We had to fill positions at the State Department. There were so many jobs that are absolutely vacant and have been vacant for 4 or 5 years. And so finding qualified individuals, getting them into those positions, getting the machinery operating again has been an extraordinary, just extraordinary work for people that I've known for a very long period of time. And again, Republican, Democrat, whatever, independent, their backgrounds did not matter. These are incredibly qualified people, and they're devoting their lives to service. And so they're moving in and they're trying, but the needle isn't moving as fast as we thought or hoped that it would. Mm-hmm. And I think that we may have underestimated just how much damage was done, and what it will take to bring those relationships back to a point of trust, and for the United States to be seen again as that democratic ideal, the superpower that we once were.
Yeah. Well, keeping it real while being hopeful at the same time, it's good to hear. Well, before I get to the final question, let me take a moment to thank the organizers of today's event. International Correspondents team member Jan DePlain, Club Membership Director Kate Helster, Club Executive Director Bill McCarran, and of course, our fantastic crew and the Press Club Broadcast Operations Center. I would not be able to do this without you guys. I'd also like to let you guys know about a few additional events happening at the club, where we are open for in-person events now. So come one, come all, public is welcome. On Friday, July 16th at noon Eastern, we will hear from award-winning foreign correspondent Jeffrey Kane, who will discuss his new book, The Perfect Police State, an undercover odyssey into China's terrifying surveillance dystopia of the future. Also on Friday, Blues Alley is live at the National Press Club for an evening with Jazzy Blue. They will debut their new chart-climbing single, Blue Sunset, Frankly, I've always thought jazz and journalism go well together. So good thing for everybody to check out. And on August 2nd, we will host documentary filmmakers Ken Burns, Sarah Burns, and David McMahon, who will discuss their new PBS documentary, Muhammad Ali. And finally, on August 6th, please come to the Holman Lounge, where we will have U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff, General Charles Q. Brown Jr. is going to join us to talk about all things Air Force. So I think now we are ready for the final question or questions. Sometimes my final question turns into two. You know, I talked a lot about how when I was reading your book, I kept thinking about the television show, Madam Secretary, which I still, even looking at you right now, Capricia, and seeing the book behind you, I'm seeing Madam Secretary. So we understand that there was some possibility of a TV deal with your book. What's next for you? And if there is a possibility of a TV deal on your book, can you share that with us?
Oh, well, yes, I can share it with you.
Okay.
I'm very excited that Sony took great interest in my book and they bought the rights to it. So I have been working with them on both a scripted and unscripted series. And I'm going to be meeting with the writer of this scripted series soon. She's coming to Washington, D.C. because she actually wants to see the Blair House. She wants to see the State Department and the White House, the places that I have walked, what I've done, and for me to share it with her. So it's not going to be, it's a little bit pulled from my background. They in particularly love, where I came from, the fact that my mother and my father were immigrants to the United States from Mexico and Croatia, and how they met, their mad love affair in Cleveland, Ohio. Go Cleveland, love Cleveland. And then, how because of my household being like a mini United Nations, many languages being spoken and food being served, how that became a core of me. And so that's going to be a thread of this character that they are developing in the scripted series. So and then, just great fun with the various episode storylines of international intrigue. So I'm very excited about it.
Super exciting. So I'm just raising my hand now for a screening for National Press Club members. We would love to see that, before it goes public to everyone, to share with our members. So let me just put that on the table.
Done, Lisa.
Sounds exciting. And I'll ask you again, looking back on your journey, because you've got a journey. And folks, I'm telling you, I didn't want to steal so much about the book, because we want people to go out and buy that book and read your story. But looking back at your journey in the ranks of leadership, what is something that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your career? And what advice would you have for that woman, that man who was saying, oh, you know what, I think I want to do that job. I think I'd be great at that.
There are a few things, Lisa, that I wish that I perhaps would have known in advance. Neither of my parents had gone to college, so they really couldn't express to me sort of the college experience and prepare me like I was able to prepare my son. They wanted me just to be the best person that I possibly can, and to avoid some of the hurt and pain that they had gone through. So they were very, very protective of me, at the same time of allowing me to sort of just spread my wings and to fly. I guess early on, I felt like I was taking some risks, but I wish I would have taken more. Life has so many wonderful opportunities, and there are serious off-ramps from those planned endeavors, those careers that we think that we should have. And taking the off-ramp, going on to that campaign for that unknown governor from Arkansas was one of those off-ramps for me, and it led to a life that I but for would have never, ever had. And so embracing the off-ramps, often, and finding out what new journeys that life has in store for you would be my advice.
All righty. Well, Capricia Marshall, thank you so much for spending just a little bit of time with us today. Again, folks, I highly recommend her book, Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy and How to Make It Work for You. Please check out the book. Thank you so much for your time today, Capricia.
Thank you, Lisa, so very much for having me. And I just have to do a quick shout out to my dear friend, Jan Duplain, that you recognized earlier. She's a wonderful person in the diplomatic community.
Now, we're happy to have her as a member here at the National Press Club. Thanks so much, Capricia.